Welcome to More Talk, where we are live on LinkedIn Audio every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And this is where Michael Zhao would normally say 11 a.m. Pacific time. Instead, we have Greg Sher, who is a leader in our industry, and just an honor to have him on. So if you are listening, you are going to get insight from somebody who has such a following. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you're more in the trenches than somebody like myself. And so I think people are interested in your voice because there's such a vacuum of other people. So thank you, Greg, for coming on here. And we already have a bigger audience than usual. So I think it just goes to show people want to hear from the front line.
Not a problem. Happy to substitute here. I'm a pinch hitter. I always liked pinch hitters. I grew up a baseball fan. So I always admired the ability of a pinch hitter to come off the bench and get a hit. So hopefully I'll be able to make some contact here.
Do you think analytics has ruined some of the best parts of the field of baseball?
That's a totally separate question, my friend. In what way? You got my head in the mortgage space.
Each person, eighth inning, Jody Reed, always, great for the Red Sox. And nowadays they say, well, Jody Reed can't hit against a submarine pitcher who's a righty, when it's cold out. And
no, I think no. You have to go with the stats, man. There's nothing richer than data. Perfect segue to mortgage. We do projections based on data, right? And a lot of times that's the difference between whether we win or lose in mortgage, right? In terms of the difference between profitability and non-profitability. Hey, do you see who's in the audience right now? There appears to be a star. I mean, there are lots of stars on here. I recognize all these names, but there's one particular gentleman who I know is very, very envious every time he hears that, you and I are doing anything together. Brian Vieaux. Are we able to pull this guy up? I mean, he's just amazing. Talk about a voice. How do we summons Brian here for a guest profile, cameo here? How do we do this?
He would have to raise his hand. Another big star is, here we go. Suzanne Livingston as well, who...
They're everywhere. So. Stars everywhere. Stars are abound. This is amazing. I never imagined I could share the stage with, Michael and Brian at the same time. Although, listen, this is a truth. I'm one of three boys. The other two boys, Michael and Brian. So it's like I'm home again.
It is.
Keller, you didn't tell me Greg Sher was going to be here.
Yeah, he wouldn't have shown up if he knew. How many people have you asked? Does that mean I was plan B? Is that what we're discovering here?
Nope, I only asked you and Brian, to be honest with you. Let's jump into... You had Michael Frantoni, and I think that's how I pronounce it on.
Frantoni, chief economist of the NBA. Yep, yesterday.
Economist of the NBA. And I noticed in the comments section, he's not getting the love, and you had to defend the line on, look, this is a hard market to predict. I would say the only thing, and we can go through what he said. I mean, we'll say it. He said that we're in the long end of a curve, 6.75 to 7% rates for consumers listening. And because he always predicted May, and until today, it looked like May, but it sounds like June now out of the 11 banks are being predicted. But he's saying we're not off, so you can still look at 6% by the end of the year. The only part I think frustrates people is 5.5 by the end. He didn't mention when, and you can't do that, obviously, as an economist, but I think the industry is just starving for...
Well, I think I know why I got the bad feedback. And it has nothing to do with the fact that Brian Vieaux is quickly becoming one of my better friends. I think people are just tired of getting kicked around, man. There have been so many false starts, the bond up, the bond down, applications up, applications down. Everyone is exhausted, man. So it's not believable. That's it. And Mike Frantoni's been wrong too. He's been wrong plenty of times. I think every economist has been wrong. The only thing I turn to is that this is an unprecedented moment in time, right? We had, so much QE poured into the market. We didn't know what was on the other side of COVID, so we had to pour a lot of it in. Maybe the last tranche or two, you could argue they should have been more careful, and in hindsight, they should have been, and they should have raised rates sooner, and inflation wasn't really transitory and all that stuff. But Mike Frantoni in the NBA, if he makes a statement like he did to me yesterday on NFM TV that rates will be at 6% by the end of the year and 5.5% at some point next year, I tend to believe him, because this is what he gets paid to do. He's great at it. The NBA, going back to your first question about data, they've got more data than anybody else. And I followed Frantoni historically over many, many years. And typically he's within a very small margin of error. What he's dealing with right now is, like I said, it's an outlier. And I think as we return to some normalcy, you'll find that his predictions are more in line. I'm hoping this is one of those moments, but I certainly understand how people are reticent. People don't want to buy into that or bet on that because it's been so unpredictable, and people are just completely and utterly exhausted.
Great speaker that speaks at actually mortgage conferences. He's starting to pop up. He's the longest surviving prisoner of war in Vietnam, tortured more than anybody, and talks a lot about starting out in an 8x8 dark room where he couldn't see anything. And what he talked about was the ones that didn't survive over there were the ones that looked forward to next Thanksgiving, next Christmas, and then that would come, in the hearing that they were supposed to be released, and then all of a sudden it would be the following Thanksgiving. And the reason he said he survived was he just focused on life on the other side, and it was very hard, obviously, to do it in being in those conditions, but that he always says is the difference. And I think that's where, drawing some similarities here, people have probably, and I think you do the great job at this, Greg, like you bring it where it goes from a LinkedIn post to like, these are real people. And I know you want to get into that more on the show, but these are not just loan officers having a tough time with rates. They're trying to budget out school tuition, right? And maybe they're using data to try and make a forecast. And now it's another 3 months, and they're just getting a little nervous that it's so hard to predict.
Well, then there's all the people that are still hanging on, trying to ascertain whether they want to stay in the business or try and pivot. And I think those are the people, Brian, who are, as exhausted as anyone. What are your thoughts, Mr. Vieaux, president, founder of FinLocker, one of the most exciting technologies on the market? What are your thoughts, my friend?
I think, as it relates to forecasting and Fran and Tony, I agree with everything you said, Greg. He's as good as anybody we have in our space in terms of forecasting. I have no reason not to believe him. My big point would be, and you hit on this, it's the population of originators, and that's down to the individual loan officer on the street. There's certainly a lot of those that are on the fringe and literally looking at a forecast and saying, okay, I could stay till May, but I can't stay till July if I don't see any pickup, right? And so there's a lot of decisions that individuals are contemplating as we speak, and we've seen that, right? We've seen companies that have been acquired, and we've seen, thankfully, we haven't seen as many that have just evaporated, but there's been some of that. So I think part of the challenge and part of the frustration that I have with any forecast, not any particular forecast, but any forecast, it's also public facing, meaning the consumers that we all are serving are seeing the same news. And so if they're to believe that in May or June or July or whatever, next year we see a 5.5, does that impact their decisions that they may have otherwise made to do something today? And they say, instead, I'm going to wait until that 5.5 that I just saw in the news that's targeted for 2025. So it's, yes, we need the forecast. We need this information, but there's all kinds of impacts to it that we just haven't seen play out. And in a lot of ways, it'd be better if it was just no hope. And then then there's this massive reset that happens and consumers just kind of get on with it.
I did find that interesting, where it looks like 1.6 trillion, he said, in 2023. And so that'll be up to 2 trillion. You said on your show, Greg, I thought you did a great job asking him about refinances and new construction, but there's going to be more business because there's less people in it when it finally does hit.
Let me ask you both a question, because I have a chart that Mike was kind enough to send me. Let's go back and don't be Googling this. All right. You have to promise me you won't Google. Since 2008, if we do 2 billion this year, where will that rank as either this equal or more than any of the 17 years or the 16 years that have predated that? So 2008 to 2016 is 16 years. I'm sorry, 2020, 23 is 16 years. How many times do you think we've been at 2 billion or more?
I'm going to guess 5. I'm going to say this is the 5th.
12.
Holy shit. Shoot.
Did you just say?
I did not.
You just lost 11 listeners. The credibility factor.
I mean, I have the. So let me explain to you my point, and hopefully I let me just articulate it for you. I'm looking at a chart that Mike Fratantoni, chief economist of the NBA, showed me that shows since 2008 what we've done as an industry. And what I'm saying is 2008 to 2023, that represents 16 years. And in those 16 years, we've had 13 years where we've had the same, right around the same volume, 2 billion, or significantly less. So if we can hit 2 billion with less people and companies that have scaled back and right-sided in terms of their overhead and cost to produce, you would think that would be one hell of a year that we're in, just getting off the ground in. So how bad is it really? Like, my friend Eddie Perez from EPM, like he thinks we're in for, a brutal time over the next 2 to 3 years. I choose not to think like that. How's that possible if we have a year that ranks up there with any other year for the most part, sans COVID, in the last, since 2008?
Yeah,
I think what Eddie was saying is he has shifted his model, right, completely from where he started, and that he's saying, if you just be prepared, in the famous words of Scar from Lion King, be prepared in case it is a little bit later in 2025. I think, that's all he was trying to say. And I think there have been times maybe in the past where he maybe meant differently, but I think that one was more of one of the more positive messages in those comments you had, Greg.
Well, I think you nailed it. He's not in the business anymore. He's not on the correspondent side. He's a wholesaler now. So maybe he feels like he can be, more free to say what he thinks or take a position. But I mean, the stats are the stats. I see the projections. I see what we've done since 2008. There's been a massive consolidation. There are far less people in the business doing the loans. So how ugly is it really going to be? I mean, look, pipeline started to really build up before we shot back up to this 4.3 plus range. When they dipped down to 3.86 and they were hovering around there and 4 for a week, we saw amazing activity we hadn't seen in a couple of years. So how is no one talking about that? And so imagine a world where we're at 6% or 6.25%, what it's going to look like. I think that it's very hard to remember that we've all been in these moments before. This is my mindset. It's just one opinion. It's very hard to remember that every single time we've been in a difficult moment, it's always turned out that there's a happy ending in each of those moments. And this will be no different. And we will all flourish again. The hope is that we learn from the mistakes we've made, that we refine the way we do business, that we cross-train more people, let go of less people. And that's where I'm sitting.
I like that perspective, Greg. You and the team that you've built at NFM and the model that you built, I'd like you to share some of the story there, because there is a lot of positives there. They don't necessarily equate to loans today or loans in the pipeline today, but the things that your team is doing with your strategy, there is a ton of activity, meaningful activity that's happening. I think for your perspective, you see that every day. Because of what you see, there's a lot of positives on the other side of it. And so maybe just share a little bit about, at a high level, the pre-pipeline activity that you guys are seeing in your business right now.
Are you speaking to the influencer division?
Yes.
We have 14 folks that are licensed loan officers that work for NFM Lending, where I work, and they all have social profiles on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and as much as they put into getting referral partners, they also have a brand that they pay very close attention to and pour into, namely videos around mortgage, and they generate an awful lot of leads. And while it doesn't convert at the rate of a lead that an agent gives you of a buyer that's ready to shop or maybe has shopped, what Brian's saying is it's the data shows, back to data again, that this is a glimpse into the future and indicative of how the mortgage transaction is going to take place as we continue to move into this tech, social media branding space. And we're very, very early in its infancy. I mean, first inning, maybe one out, going back to baseball. And that's the reason why, as I point out, that so many of these coaching companies that are out there now have this, the new ones that are emerging, they all have a focus on branding. You can't find me a new coaching company mortgage coaching or real estate coaching that doesn't have an element leading with how to brand, how to build a social presence, how to own your own brand, commoditize your following, because we all know that it's growing exponentially, and that the pie of people getting leads from agents and having the agent dictate the trajectory of the process with the borrower, it's in the process of changing. Nothing happens overnight. But what we're seeing here at NFM is that we've driven in 65,000 leads in 32 months from these influencers. They're all free. They're all organic. They're all as a result of videos that they've done. And let me just give you some statistics, folks. Of the 65,000 people that have seen a video from one of our licensed influencers and raised their hands and said, engage me, help me figure out whether I'm ready to buy a home, 97% of them indicated they want to buy a home. 84% don't have a real estate agent yet. And of the 84% that don't have an agent, 94% are saying, I'm open to an introduction. And so we're getting to these folks much earlier in the funnel. And that's why I say that the way that we are accustomed to business taking place is changing, and it's continuing to change, and it's not going to happen overnight, but in 3 years, it's going to look much, much different than it looks right now, because we got younger people entering the first-time homebuyer process, and they are much more apt to act on someone they follow than on the advice of mom or dad. And Brian, your technology FinLocker has been instrumental in our growth as well, because anyone that doesn't qualify now, your system speaks to what I'm saying, getting to consumers earlier on in the funnel. So your system identifies where people are lacking, what kind of nurturing they need to rehabilitate them or get them ready for the purchase. So it's that partnership and partnerships like that are going to tie this all together and really extend it to the moon.
I think and you stole the show at the IMB because it's like actionable steps that we know work. And I think there's a different level of the influencer versus you see a lot of what do you want to call them, coaches that done a great job like myself that have had to adapt in how hard of a work environment it is in mortgage and go out there and consult. But those type of videos are not the same to me as your influencer. And for one reason, I think, and Steve Richmond said it on one of our shows, so go back on our podcast. We do have some great quality content. It's called parasocial. But when somebody's like an influencer, you start to connect with them almost personally, even if you've never met them. Like there's someone from my hometown, what do they call humble brag, Dave Portnoy, who runs Barstool Sports. I've probably spoken to him a couple times in my life, but like not in 10 years. But I feel like, I don't know, I've just seen so many of his videos now. I just feel like I know him somewhat. And I think that's where the reason why I've seen some of your influencers, they get like 237 comments about mortgage questions. I think it's because people bond with it, and it's a different type of video. So it's definitely something that needs to be leaned in this industry. And you and I talk about it, Greg. I think sometimes there just needs to be more collaboration on what works and what the disruptors can't compete with. And I think that's one of the secret weapons is Zillow, ICE, Amazon. They can't compete with the connection of a parasocial strategy. They can compete with some other things that we do.
Shout out Dave Portnoy. Shout out Barstool. If you're looking for a new show on your platform, the More Talk show is up for sale. That's official. I get a cut of that, Gallagher.
If he bought his company for $1, he's going to buy us for $0.25.
Well, you wish you could get $0.25, but none of us is going to get $0.25 from the guy. Hey, this is going back to Greg's statistics. What's positive for me and I'm encouraged by is none of those statistics are really in any of the forecasts. All these consumers, this pent up pool of, prospective home buyers, first time home buyers specifically, that I've seen estimated at 30 million plus. None of the activity that Greg described, that's happening in other places too, just not at the scale that Greg's got it going on at. None of that's really showing up in any of these forecasts. So I think, Greg, where you can be positive and bullish is because you're in the weeds every day with this pre-data almost, right? This activity that's just not recorded anywhere and not reflected in the forecast. And I'm encouraged. I'm getting ready to board a flight, so I'm going to jump off here in a minute, but I'm leaving another client of ours that's kind of doing the same thing in the social space, just a slightly different flavor of it. And they're, I'm leaving their office after a day, and they're extremely bullish on the market because, again, they see this pre-activity in their own ecosystem. And so, I'm kind of thinking about this down to the individual loan officer level, who's maybe they're not an influencer today at scale, but every one of us is an influencer at some level. Even if our following is 500 people or 1,000 people, there's an opportunity at a hyper local level for every loan officer to use the same strategy. And maybe it's not going to create 65,000 leads, but maybe it creates 15 over the next 30 days. That'd be pretty cool for everybody, I think.
I think you're right. I want to just say that so you know where I'm coming from. This is Greg talking. If we didn't have the influencer division, I would still feel bullish about where we're headed as an industry. And I feel like I'm a reality guy. I really do. This has nothing to do with, the preview or the window or the lens from which I'm looking at things as far as social media is concerned. That happens to be something we're in the process of, we're one of many or one of few, depending on your opinion, that's leading in that area. But relative to our production, it's a small, tiny little sliver. To me, it's simple math. We've got far less people in our business. It's projected we're going to do $2 trillion in production this year. That'll be at or more than what we've done in the last 13 years. I'm sorry, the last 16 years. It'll be the 12th, tied for the 12th best or better years. There have been 4 years better than that statistically. This is a chart from the NBA that I'll probably post when I'm done on my LinkedIn profile. So I don't see, and then on top of that, the activity that picked up when we just had a bond at 386 and the amount of applications that were flying in. Yeah, it could be a little bit longer now and rates aren't going to come down as fast as we thought, but there's no question we're at the end of this, and I'm going to continue to double down on the amount, the effort that I'm putting in and as hard as I'm working, because I still feel like we're all going to look up in a year and be like, man, thought I had to get out, but man, I'm not just in it, but we're profitable again. We're helping a lot of homeowners. And we've learned a lot from the 2.5-year malaise that we were in. And so that's my mindset. And it really has nothing, I appreciate the compliments and everything, but it's not about the influencer division. It's just about my own personal sentiment from having been in this business 26 years and all the ups and downs and all the headwinds. That when it gets, really, really bad, you feel like it's never going to end. And then boom, one day you wake up and it's on its way to being really, really good. And why would this be different? Just because technology is a little bit different? I mean, we have half the people we had, or more than half, or less than half rather, than we had during the boom. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Brian, are you flying private? I mean, you're very well off. Everybody knows you're a dapper guy. Are you on like a Gulfstream? What kind of plane are you getting on right now?
Yeah, I am actually flying private on the Delta family private jet.
Nice.
With 450 other Delta family members.
Enjoy your flight, buddy.
We'll give out the Twitter handle where they can track your flight.
Yeah, we need the tail number, man. We got to get the tail number. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to pivot to my Green Banner post, if I may.
That's what I was going to say. I know.
You and I. I'm not going to read it. That nobody wants to hear me read a post. I mean, that is like the most boring thing. I think people would rather watch paint dry than have me read a post. But on my LinkedIn,
very sentimental side. I don't know. It kind of, maybe we can edit it in and have third.
No, I can look. There's a lot of talk about these green banners, right? So I just took a minute a couple days ago, and I'm like, what kind of humility does it take? I just put myself in the shoes of people that have the banner up. Like, what would it take for me to have to go as far as to put up a banner to say I don't have a job? Like, I mean, I can't imagine the depths to which I'd have to be forced to go to take that measure, right? So I started thinking about that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to tell these people like what I think when I see a green banner and you're in the mortgage business. And so I named the top 10 things I think, and I will name those. I'm not going to read the whole post, but here are the 10 things that come to mind. And these are very raw and real. This is what I think about the green banners: empathy, gratitude, appreciation, respect, concern, urgency, sadness, admiration, your courage, and your commitment. And so, I mean, it went viral. There are 39,000 impressions, and this is just 2 days old. There were 646 reactions, 85 comments, and 11 reposts. And so this really resonated with a lot of people. And I think it just goes to show how raw and real the moment is for those people that are still left on the sidelines, many of whom are trying to pivot out of the business and have found that their skill sets that they learned in mortgage aren't necessarily translatable in the real world. And that's a lot of the feedback that I've gotten. First of all, a lot of thank yous and the comments from the community have been unbelievable. They've been amazing. I so appreciate that we're all kind of in this together, trying to push this up the hill and keep everybody as positive as they can be. But it was an exercise of putting myself in their shoes. And I think it really brought out a lot of the emotion that's taking place right now among people that are looking for work.
I want you to keep going, Greg, but I do want to point out what stuck out to me so you can talk about it is in the message you got, they said that and I grew at the company, like I think there's going to be less and less jobs on the operations side. I see something that nobody else sees and happy to talk to people about it. It's exciting for owners, but I think it's going to be more job loss. And so I think when it says, it was so powerful when it says that the requirements on LinkedIn are, do you have skills in Salesforce, or do you have skills as a Scrum Master, or do you have skills as in Microsoft.net? They do, like they've run teams, they've run processor teams, but they're either insecure because their skills are in Encompass rather than in what the requirement says, or the AI bots that allow them to get to an interview to show how special they are never getting past application stage. So this person said, they've had to take a job, with UPS while they looked, because they've applied 1,400 times and maybe have gotten 30 interviews. And then when they get them, they get asked questions. So as an industry, it just stood out from your message. It's almost like we need an academy to help, or while we're training them, give them, insulated it so much. I think it's what the point was.
I want everybody to know that you're talking about a real situation. Like, this is someone that DM'd me. I got permission to share it with Mike, and I'm going to share it probably with everybody else. This is someone that's been in the mortgage business. He was in the mortgage business forever and ever and ever, was a master in mortgage systems, but has applied to, as Mike said, according to this gentleman, over 1,000 jobs. And he eventually settled on, he's got 3 kids. He's 42. He's making $17 an hour for UPS right now, and, struggling to make ends meet, and feels like one of the fortunate ones, by the way, because he knows so many other people that can't even get jobs. And so where my mind takes this is, can we set up something where we help these folks tighten up their resumes, where we raise visibilities in other industries, find the synergies between the skill sets, like what does processing translate to? What businesses does that speak to? And that's a greater project, but I am talking to some people about this idea of offering some real support free for these folks that are out there struggling, trying to figure out, hey, how can I make being a processor and all the skills, like what industry can that translate into where I can be paid a fair wage and maybe never look back if I'm tired of mortgage and done with it. But right now, you can imagine what it feels like to feel like your skills that it's all you've ever known. You've processed, you've underwritten, you've closed, you post-closed, you shipped, you've insured, whatever it is, to feel like I put 15 years into this business, and as I apply for these other jobs, I'm lost. Nobody seems to understand what the hell I did before. And I don't even understand, as this unemployed person, what businesses this translates well into. And I want to help solve that problem. And I am working with somebody on that. And that's a to be continued thing. So, Mike, it's 2:30.
Have you ever run a call center of 5 or more people for 8 years? And it's like, no, I haven't, but I've called customers all day long who are frustrated and have been able to talk them down, not change their rate lock, go somewhere else. It's the same skill set. It's just not, have you run VO, those trigger words, like have you run VoIP teams? It's tricky. And then you feel like you never qualify for anything. And I just thought you pointing that out is, I'm going to volunteer too to help with that collaboration, because I think it's necessary.
We just have to be more honest with people. I myself failed as a leader, as an executive at NFM. I actually used to tell people, and even recently until this last run, I feel ashamed But I would boast that we've never had a massive round of layoffs before, and I don't anticipate that we will. And that was 25 years of never having a, widespread cut. And the nerve of me to say that to somebody. I had 25 years of, empirical data to make that kind of comment. And it was true at the time, but it ended up being misleading. I feel terrible about that. I'm never going to say that again. So that's an example of learning from this moment and being better the next time around. That's one of the things that I'm talking about. And I challenge everybody to do that. I also think we need to cross-train our people better, and we need to be honest with people on the way in. Like, if you are coming in some instances, you might be coming in to create a new position, and there's going to be more traction with that. But there may be instances where we say, look, I can't make any promises. Like, things are good right now, but I can't promise that if production goes down 40%, we might not look at, lowering our cost to produce, and that could affect you. So too many of us were not honest, partly because we could have never imagined what we would be faced with, and partly because it was easier just to say what they wanted to hear. And that's not acceptable. So I got to bounce. I appreciate this, Mike. Thank you, and everybody else for listening. And please connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me if you can. You see my name up here. Anyway, thank you very much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Greg. We appreciate it. That was awesome. I'm going to bring up Jay here to go from one leader to another. And while I do, I do want to point out real quick, just some market update.
By the way, Michael, I just showed up, and that was a great ending to listen to.
Yeah, the whole thing's been okay. So Jay's up here, Michael's up here. Give you guys a chance. I'm just going to read real quick, courtesy of Ralph Armenta. This was just a great breakdown of Mark Zandi, who is chief economist at Moody's. You're not going to be able to hear him every day. His summary was, one, a softer landing. If the consumer can continue to hang tough, seems to be the theme of this show, QE is over and out. Number two, Fed has accomplished its goal and it has to start easing. That's according to Zandi, though. Number three, Zandi expects the Fed to begin easing at their June meeting in 25 BIP increments. Also today, coincidentally, 11 banks, most of them moved to June over May, which is relevant to what we talked about earlier in the show with Michael Frantoni. Number four, inverted yield curve stays inverted through 24 and into the beginning of 2025. So probably, I don't know, except to keep an eye out for commercial real estate, always bubbles up when people talk about that. Number five, even with the easing, do not expect rates to settle below the 6% handle, which is what they said 5.5%, but they didn't give a time next year. And we have Jay up here, who Mr. KPI, so he can probably get into why you got to focus on the day and not on the years. Still over $1.4 trillion in untapped home equity makes this segment of the marketplace the place to be. Mortgage refinance for this borrower segment will be tough. Michael Zhao and I talk about this every week, so we'll stay off of that this week. Go to previous episodes to hear about this, but I did love this quote from him. You will have to pry that 2.5% to 4% mortgage rate out of their cold, dead hands. So just know that. I guess, if the economist from Moody's is saying it, there's probably some facts behind it or data. Number seven, consumer life effects continue to be the overriding factor for cash requirements. Close-end seconds, HELOC, HEI will see further growth exceeding 2023, which saw 2.7 times growth from 2022. Number eight, and there's only 9 here, folks. Based on Zandi's current economic forecast, borrower delinquency and defaults will meander and be less of a concern for middle income. Default servicing and support vendor will continue to be a big yawn. And then number 9, global conflict in the presidential election will be the biggest outlier in the previous 8. So thank you for jumping on here, Michael. But just getting right to Jay. Jay, you've heard Greg be a large voice in the industry, which is hard for people to do. We were debating, is it because of politics? Is it because just never really had social media growing up, so a lot of the leaders didn't have to do it? Or is it, just wealthy enough that they kind of spend time doing other things and have a personal life? I don't know if your thoughts directly are on that, but this is a raw place to talk. And I think the subject of today is maybe where the industry is going and what can we do as, industry voices to make sure, in my opinion, here's mine, that we don't support all these vendors that make hundreds of billions of dollars, walk out on the other end as, I'll call it, I'm pretending I'm a lender, but anybody in the industry with no equity, no nothing. And I think if we do that again, we're going to be ripe for disruption. So how do people start working together And is voice, I guess, important in that?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly, and sorry for the long-winded question.
To answer your first question, Greg is a wonderful voice. The reason why you don't see more Gregs or me, like, it's my view that most leaders are fearful of offending the wrong person and not being able to find a job somewhere else. I mean, it's not like, so for me, I'll call out another lender because I think they're full of it. I think they're doing the wrong things and they're not being a good advocate for community, mostly because I know I would never work for that firm. So I don't really care who I offend over there. There is been an exodus. It's really telling. Like every leader was really smart in 19, 20, and 21. Everybody was a genius, right? It's in these markets where you find the actual operators, like people that are willing to make tough decisions, stand up, do the right thing. And frankly, you've seen some of these leaders and they bounce from company to company every year. They never take a stand on anything. And the industry, in my view, like I said at Housing Wire, I'm not 65 years old. I'm not getting out of this thing. I have another 20, 25 years in this thing. So it's my job to make sure I like the industry that I work in. And so being an advocate for fiscally responsible lenders that are doing the right thing for their consumers, for their employees, I think if you're a leader of a company, you owe it to the industry and to your people to be honest and just be upfront, direct, to the point, and make good fiscal decisions for your organization. And to the vendor side of the things, we have probably a not so nice term in my organization. Vendors, you're either an asset or a liability. And some vendors have become leeches. And like to your point, they do nothing except suck profit out of your each loan and then increase costs for the consumer because it's fancy and it's the newest best thing and XYZ is doing it. Fewer loans means all these other vendors have to figure out a way to make themselves valuable. And for me, this last couple of years, we looked at every vendor we had, and if they were a liability, they're gone. If they're an asset, they stay here. But yeah, there's a lot to sort through, a lot to look forward to, but the industry is a mess right now.
Can you break down? I love to try and tell other people about this. It's you got to be in the industry for a while to understand it. Can you, in simplest terms, for just the average loan officer maybe listening, saying, "Oh, if I ran a company, I would do it." Can you break down centralized models versus like distributed branches running their own P&Ls, and how that factors into where the industry is going and why sometimes loan officers can bring bad vendors into the industry because you got to do it if you're constricted to your model. Can you just explain those maybe?
Yeah, every model has got probably pluses and minuses. The last 3 years, the only thing that has mattered is lowering your cost to manufacture, period. Because when the industry is over capacity, simple supply and demand, there's not enough mortgages for the number of people that are out there selling these things. So everybody is going to sell them cheaper. And so the lowest cost provider is going to have an advantage. So whether it's, really heavy distributed retail models with a bunch of overhead are in some ways at a disadvantage against somebody that can work for $500 a loan. Now, you sacrifice some tools, you sacrifice some marketing, probably sacrifice some service by being the lowest cost provider. And so I think there's a balance between those two things. And everything that I've seen is what I was told 5-6 years ago. This millennial generation is going to do everything online, and Rocket Home Loans is going to do everything through their app on their phone, which has proven completely false. Yes, you need an online presence. Yes, you need to be in the social space. You probably need to have an app. But when somebody's working on a $400,000 loan, they want to talk to somebody. And they want to have a really great service experience when they do that. And that takes people, and that takes process, and that takes all the things. I don't have a preference on model. I run wholesale, I retail, I have call center, I have all the things. And each one of them serves an individual purpose. And it attacks a different type of consumer that we're targeting as well. So,
yeah, I actually said in my recent post, I think the Rocket Mortgage push a button was the biggest head fake disruption. I think it's going to be one of 3 areas. It's going to be, the most likely will be a data exchange where you can sell, source data to an exchange and make fragmented money. And then that'll just, and there'll be lenders involved in it, but it's a lot more realistic than to think somebody, you have to really disrupt at the Wall Street level, the people holding the gold, to disrupt at the consumer experience level. I think we just learned there's no secret sauce. People like to deal with people at the end of the day, but I don't know. I think the mortgage industry's done a good job adapting. I just don't think they've grabbed enough equity out of all the people they brought up to reinvest in round 2 here, and that's something they're gonna have to make up for in the next round. That's what my voice is hold a couple more cards to the table next time. Don't just for a steak dinner give your entire P&L away.
Yeah, well, I mean, to give you a data point, if with all the technology we've added, all the different income and asset verifications we provided, all the data security, everything that we provided, mobile applications, all the different things, today, it's still today, right this very minute, costs more to manufacture a loan than it did prior to all the technology. In fact, underwriting is slower, processing is slower. It just costs more money to manufacture a loan, even with all this technology. And so you have to really think through that exercise of, am I getting a benefit from using this thing or am I not? Shoot, when we had stacks of files in our office, not to be the old guy in the room, but I mean, our underwriters are underwriting 9 a day, and now they're doing 2 with technology behind them.
Yeah, I mean, they also didn't have Microsoft Chrome, with 9 tabs that they could end up, while they're waiting for their LOS to load, it ended up in a doom scroll or something. So I think that part's getting ignored too. You just went to work. You had no phone and you worked, right? And not saying they don't work, but you can get distracted so easily on anything right now. And are you a fan, Jay, of The Greatest Showman, the movie? Do you think he was a really good business person, or do you think he just got a lot of extraordinarily lucky circumstances fall? And you know why I'm asking that. Do you think, were these people great business people in 1920, or were they great at, vocalizing and getting people behind them in an abundancy model? Or both, obviously.
It's probably a mixture of both. The creativity behind that guy in a time where people needed a distraction. I mean, it's pretty relevant now. I mean, the art of distraction is prevalent in politics and business and everything. And the louder you bark and the more times you say the same thing over and over again becomes the truth. We see that in our industry and a couple players that like to talk a lot. To answer your question, he found a niche. He exploited it. He marketed it like crazy. He was an influencer. He ran around that city and told everybody what he was trying to do and put on a really great show. And people left there being satisfied. So in that regard, he provided a product that somebody wanted and did a nice job doing it.
Hey, Jay, this is Michael. And I got a quick question for you, because you were just talking about how we have more technology and, and I've been in business for about over 20, almost 30 years now, actually. And I just have one question, is that we have harder underwriting than 20 years ago. We have more technology than 20 years ago. We have all these awesome structures, but yet we have so many check the checkers. So do you think there's a way to reduce the amount of checking the checker so that we can create more efficiencies, create faster underwriting times, create more opportunity costs to save a company more money? And I just think that it would be more efficient financially for a company to stop hiring so many people to check the checker when there's just more opportunity to create a more efficient mortgage loan.
Yeah, for that answer, you have to go directly to the agencies that support us. They've decided to deploy technology in a way that's affected every mortgage company in America, where before AI, you would deliver a pool of loans to Fannie, they would QC like 10% of them, they'd come back with some findings and you'd rectify it. Now, they come back to you through AI scrub with every single thing that you manufactured. It's become incredibly difficult to work with all of the agencies, Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie. That in that regard, technology has not helped the independent mortgage banker. And it's not like mortgage bankers were purposely doing bad things, but you make footfall mistakes on a loan, an underwriter missed something, it shouldn't be a repurchase. Today, the answer is buy the loan back. So until I get some sort, and to even further this, this is a little frustrating. So everybody heard about day one certainty and how you got rep and warrant relief and all those types of things. And all you have to do is run work number and you'll be fine. PIW, you'll be fine. Well, a couple of years in, we found out that's not the case. If you screwed up some other part of that loan, you don't have rep and warrant relief and you're buying the loan back. So I wish the answer, Michael, was get rid of the checkers. The agencies are making it so I need more checkers. And like even now,
Crazy.
like the newest thing is lenders are now going to be responsible for appraiser bias. Like this, you can't even make this stuff up. Wherein if an appraiser uses a term that could be considered bias or redlining and there's a bunch of words within that that the appraisers aren't allowed to use, and the AMCs are supposed to be checking. But if I don't have a secondary process to validate that none of these words are on the SSR report, immediate repurchase. So guess what I get to do? I get to add on a vendor that'll do AI on every appraisal that I do, make sure none of these words are in there. Yeah, it's expensive to manufacture a loan. I'd love to get rid of the checkers, except the agencies aren't going to let that happen.
It reminds me of Rudy. You just summed up the whole industry in one. I mean, that's it. And then that AI company thinks they're so smart too, because but you're like, this is just like, you guys are smart, thank you. But like, this is just why I keep stacking and stacking. By the way, this podcast, one of our main sponsors is Velix Valuations, which is an appraisal firm. So even if you're using an ANC, there is nobody more qualified in knowing hybrid appraisers and probably this subject than direct to the appraiser themselves. So please reach out to them or us and mention More Talk. I always say it's always good to be direct to the source, so when it gets busy, you got contacts. Jay, what are your thoughts as the industry's? I'm finding a lot of them. I'm looking at the HMDA. I can almost predict now with HMDA generation volume is getting acquired by the larger companies, and then I think that's a good thing for anybody right below, say, the $4 billion mark in 2021. They're going to come right back up, I think, and fill that gap of the ones that were acquired. But what's the story for IMBs, and do they keep working together, or is the landscape going to be to work in silos and may the best process win?
Well, I mean, I love my competitors and I dislike them as well, right? Everybody's like, you saw a lender go under. That's terrible, But to answer your question, the space is still pretty crowded. Capital has been drained to a degree that I don't think I've ever seen. There's a lot of lenders that made a bunch of money in 2021. We've seen some big ones, sold off all their servicing. Why? Because they're out of money. At some point, owners go, look, I don't want to lose $20 million a year anymore. So I think you'll see quite a few more academy exercises in the next 6 to 12 months. Everybody thought they were going to get bailed out. Rates dropped. There was like this sigh of relief in the industry. We're going to be fine. No, you're not going to be fine, especially if you don't have your expense structure right. The collaboration component, like, look, I've got 3 or 4 guys in my position I talk to weekly. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? The MBA used to be a bit better advocate, I think, for independent mortgage bankers. Frankly, they're working on stuff that I need them to work on other things than what they're working on. Collectively, if smaller independent mortgage bankers, they should work together, because the answer is if we don't, then we should just quit, give all the loans to UWM and rock it. There's your answer. Like, tap out, just get out. Collaboration goes a long ways. And it's not like everybody's worried about sharing their trade secret. Everybody knows the drill here. If you're an executive, you know what you're supposed to do. Execution is totally different than knowing what you have to do. But vendor selection and working with agencies, that's something we should all be working together on.
Yeah, they're choosing a hotel vendor. We're going to put a hotel in our town, and we're going to do a land lease, so we own it. And it's interesting because everybody's basing it on who can build the best hotel, but it really needs to be who can operate the best hotel, because the build's going to be done in 6 months, and then who's going to operate it for the next 99 years if you really want to pick a winner in that area. And I think you're saying the same thing. We still need to operate at the best efficiency. And I know who the disruptor is, and I think everybody's in the wrong direction. And I don't like saying it because everybody comes after me, and I'll start to give little tea leaves of it. But let's say, for example, they're having a conference the same week, the same days as the advocacy conference, because I think that's how you stop disruption. What our industry does so well is advocate and make it so complex that a big company, like Amazon doesn't want, and that's not my answer, doesn't want to come in and do it. And then you go and you push AI, because the more AI involved, like you just said, the more people in the mortgage industry start spending money in the wrong areas and drain their account, because the real winner is, can you lobby the best, I think. And so if they get you wasting all your money on AI and not lobbying, if they get you to go to the conference with the big shrimp cocktails and not go to advocacy, right, and come back from that conference and say, we got to spend a ton of money on AI, we're falling behind. The MBA can do more if more people attend, and it doesn't just have to be leaders. I mean, when you see a processor there, as somebody who goes, it's just as powerful to have help as you go around to see, as I go around to see Elizabeth Warren and Markey and Seth.
Well, if you're going to dance around it, I'll say it. I'll give you my thoughts on that, Mike. The biggest disruptor for me, it's not a disruptor for me, but it will be for the industry. And I think a player that's not doing the right things would be ICE and everything surrounding them. Because if you think about it, who has more data, consumer data, and mortgage data than them right now? No one. What do you think they do with that? What do you think they do when you're in a monopoly?
Their slogan is, if you can grade it, you can trade it.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I feel bad. Years ago, I didn't want to be on anything having to do with their platform. So we built our own. It's put us in a really good situation where I don't have to pay a lot of money per loan to do business with them. And all they have to do is, I mean, what would they do? Like tomorrow they said it's $500 a loan to fund a loan to those guys. Every lender that's on them has to agree to that because you can't switch out your LOS. So
yeah, you're right. I didn't want to say it, but now that you said it, I'll say it. So here's my question. I have so many thoughts in my head about this, and nobody in the industry wants to hear to talk to me about it, so I've stopped doing it. But here's my first question. When you made that decision, did you feel the same way about Encompass? See, and I think that's like where it's a little bit off is Encompass never had a chance of disrupting. ICE is not your what do they call it? Like not your grandpa's Encompass. It is a global company that already disrupted healthcare, already disrupted energy, already has the NASDAQ, and they have a trading platform. And more than Encompass, they bought a company called IDS, which is a Chicago-based exchange that is going to be the first one to do real estate futures. And so it's these exchanges that are going to be a lot more disruptive. And I think I'll stop now just so I can get a job in this industry. But you'll hear, no, but it goes back. I think you made a great point, Jay. That's why we all don't say these things is like the guy from Herrig Coffee once spoke at an ALS event I did. And the most powerful thing he ever said was so simple. It's like I always say hello to the people on the way up because I never know who I'll meet on the way back down. And you got to be a little bit careful because if you need to land a job, you can get blackballed pretty easily in this industry.
Yeah. Well, they feel free to blackball me. I'm good. I just, look, it's not all bad, but it's unfortunate because the industry allowed it to happen. The government allowed it to happen. They passed, all the government tests because they lobby exceptionally well and they should allow those things to happen. But there's a lot of data sitting in one place. So it'll be interesting what they do with it.
There's only one thing Fannie and Freddie have ever lobbied against ever because they technically can't. And it was the Black Knight Encompass merger. But the whole thing is they're not going to disrupt you on a faster operation. You still got to win getting upstream, right? And so I think Encompass is kind of their lost leader there. Now you got me going. But I will say, it's great having you on here. Do you have any final thoughts on, I guess we kind of went over here, so you probably have to jump. But any final thoughts on the job, like the people that are going to lose their jobs and lose them because of automation? Is there a way the industry can do better on just having better skills that match what outside of the industry, what job listings are asking for?
People put themselves in a car. Why do mortgage banking? Oh, no, you don't. You're like a financial advisor. I mean, our skills in mortgage, you think about what a processor or funder or doctor are, what they do. They're solving puzzles all day long. And there's some of the most talented people in the industry. You're dealing with angry customers all day. So you have patience, you have grace, you have humility, and you're able to solve puzzles. And so I think telling the story, I think, helping people write their resumes such. I had just a side story. I was talking to this attorney and they're like, it doesn't look like you have an MBA in finance. I'm like, nope. But here's what I do have. 25 years providing billions of dollars of transactions to homeowners across America, right? And so I think you're not just a funder. You're not just a doctor, right? You assisted in the largest financial transaction of somebody's life. I think, if the industry Broker Action Coalition doing all this stuff and AIM doing all this stuff, like help these people find new jobs. And anybody that we've let go, we've helped them with placement services. Like, listen, here's where I think you should go, and here's what I think it should look like for you. This industry will get better. There'll be a need for these people. Probably not the next couple of months, but at some point, there's a bull market out there, and we're going to need them again. And the beauty of that, by then, the competitors that should not be in the business will be gone. And the people that have a good, solid capital base, they can weather all the storms, will be here. And these employees will be with companies that are a little bit more stable as we move forward. So for me, I hope it's not a strategy, but this market will change. It will. It'll happen overnight, and all of a sudden we'll be busy again and we'll need people. So that'd be my view.
Is there any event or anything about your company or anything about yourself that you'd like to plug here? Because we were just told earlier in the show we could sell it for a quarter, so I don't think we have much to compensate. So maybe anything you want with our voice.
No, I would just say the thing I guess I'm most proud of, you can go back to 2007 and name all the mortgage companies that still have the same name on their building, and we're one of them. And so we're pretty proud of that. We weathered every single storm. Why? Because we make tough decisions quickly. We hire a lot of our tenure in our company is exceptional. And at the core of that, the only thing I care about is whether my customer had a good experience. And so, we don't have private jets and planes and yachts. We focus on people and doing loans. That's us in a nutshell. So
we appreciate you having us on here. Jay, just so everybody knows, on Spotify and YouTube, where you guys are probably listening, if you can give us a subscribe and a like, or hashtag bring back Jay, we'll bring him back. We are obviously a podcast first, but we do tape live on Thursdays with the hope that someday people come up and ask questions like a radio show and ask them quickly. And we appreciate all of our guests. Michael Zhao, any final thoughts? And do you want to tell us where you were and just give a quick shout out to how you're bettering yourself and how others could do it as you take us out here?
Sure, thanks. By the way, Jay, that was amazing. Thank you so much for being so candid with us. Totally appreciate that. I was just at the multifamily underwriting class for the Mortgage Bankers Association because I'm underwriting commercial multifamily mortgages for a family office, and so that's what I was doing as a part of my continuing education, and just appreciating what the MBA is doing to help its members. I think that there's not enough ops people that are actually members of the MBA that take continuing ed. They may be employees of a mortgage company or an IMB or even a bank, but they don't take membership inside of the MBA. So for the trade association and for each of the people that are a part of the MBA, I think we need to have more support staff. That may be more expensive if the IMB pays for it, if their employer pays for it, or the actual employee. But if you want support, as a general rule, I think if you want support as an employee and you're thinking that the industry should help you, then you should support the industry trade organization to some extent. If they're going to also help you, there needs to be some kind of better arrangement so that we can all help each other. But with that, it was a great show today. Thanks, Jay, so much for joining us. And Michael, great to be here for the second half of the show. I'm just grateful that we can be here to help our trade.
Yep, let's talk next Thursday at 2 Eastern. And Michael, we missed you in the opening. And what time Pacific?
It'll be 11 a.m. Pacific time here in sunny San Diego.
There you go.